Welcome to Sounding Board. This is a weekly community television program produced by club members of Seroptimus International of Novato. The mission of the organization is to help improve the lives of women and girls, both locally and globally. We do this by providing them with programs leading to social and economic empowerment. My name is Carol Bennett, and I'm a club member and the moderator today in this hot sun. Our topic today is a visit to the museum at Olomapli State Historic Park, and the sign right by 101 is right behind me. And there's a special spot inside the park. It's called the Octagon Brick Oven Site. We're going to go up there and meet Jim Crumpler. He's the one in charge of all these, the museum association. So let's go. Come on. So here's Jim Crumpler, the director of the Novato Museum Association. So tell us what that's about.
Well, a few years ago, after I retired, I got involved with a couple of museums in Novato, and then the more I got involved in them, I realized that there was actually 6 museums in Novato. They all kind of had the same problems. They were small, nobody knew they existed, nobody knew where they were at. They all kind of worked separately. So I thought, if we can get these guys together, we can have an organization, and as a whole, I think we can accomplish something.
Great.
So that's what I've been doing the last couple of years. I think I've made some kind of, a lot more people know that there's 6 museums out. There's a brochure out there showing on a map where all these museums are and how close they are to each other, and a little bit descriptions of them. And this is one of the things that we're doing. We're doing a video of the 6 museums.
That's great. And at the end of this program, we're going to have you list all 6 of them. So you guys, in the meanwhile, can be thinking of all 6 of them. But we are standing in this really strange spot outlined by, well, I guess it's called the Octagon Brick Oven Site.
So, Olompali is an incredible place. People have lived here for 8,000 years, and there's all this history that you're going to learn about later on in the video. But we're talking about the 60s.
In the 1960s, you're talking about.
In the 60s, a commune was here, and the commune was called the Chosen Family. And they did all kinds of amazing things. One of the things they did was they made bread and brought it over to Haight-Ashbury and sold it over there to kind of support themselves. So they made this
and
octagon.
That's Haight-Ashbury. You're talking about the intersection in San Francisco, in case somebody's watching
that whole
this.
neighborhood, back in the hippie days in the 60s.
Right.
And, this was kind of the getaway for a lot of the rock groups. I mean, the Grateful Dead would come out here. Janis Joplin would come out here. All these famous people were right here.
Wow.
And so this octagon was made by these guys, and this is where they made their bread.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. Okay, we'll be back to you.
All right.
So, Diane Einstein, you are the chair of the board of the Olompali People Cooperating Association. Fabulous. So standing up here at the entrance to the park, it has real special significance for you. I know that you've told me that before. So tell us about the importance of this location for the Coast Miwok village of Olompali.
Well, from this location, you get a sense of why this was a major trading manufacturing village within the world of the Coast Miwok. It was along the main trading route. The trading route began south of Tati and extended all the way down to Sausalito. And so from here, one could not only be in the middle of the trade route, but we were on the east-west vector of the trade route as well. In the baylands below, 200 years ago, everything that you see in brown was San Pablo Bay.
Oh.
And
so there was water coming right up there.
There was water that came right up to the village.
Oh my gosh.
And the members of the tribe would get in their tule canoes and head over and trade with the Ohlonies on the other side of the bay. Oh. And from San Antonio Valley, they would go out to the coast and trade with the Coast Miwok in Tamales.
So they would come over the mountains then?
They would go through the valley, San Antonio Valley, out to Tamales. And Olompali, its name is South Place or South People. That's what it meant in the Coast Miwok language. And when you say South People or South Place, that's really a question mark, because the territory extended all the way up to Katati. But when you realize that the trade route went from Katati to Sausalito, when you were coming down on the old trade route and you looked south, when you're coming down, looking down through the Petaluma Valley and looking south, the mountain you saw was Olompali, which is the Coast Miwok name for the mountain behind us. And when you saw that mountain in the south, you knew that you were at the beginning of the Marin Peninsula and you were at the beginning of the San Francisco Bay.
Wow. So this was truly a major trading site.
Right.
That is fabulous.
North, south, east, west.
Fabulous. Well, let's go on into the visitor center there and see what's out there. Okay? Come on.
Okay, now we are in the Visitor Center's museum, and I'd like to point out the different display cases that we have here.
Great.
And I'd like to tell you about some of the individuals that are represented in these display cases. In this first display case, that has artifacts from the American Indian era. And it was during the American Indian era that we had a young gentleman by the name of Camilo Monisha, who was born... Camilo Monisha.
Okay.
He was born in an Indian village not too far from Olompali, and he became a missionized Indian, baptized into Mission San Rafael. It was when he was at Mission San Rafael that his father was given the responsibility for the mission's livestock that grazed here at Olompali. Olompali was a mid-stop on the El Camino Real between San Rafael and Sonoma.
Now, El Camino Real, those are those little lamp posts that you see all the way
Right,
down? That's
right.
fabulous. So
And
that
the-
was the original El Camino Real then, huh?
The El Camino Real ran
Fabulous.
right through Olompali.
Wow.
And there was a lot of grazing land here, and this was the midpoint between San Rafael and Mission Sonoma. And so it was very important for the mission in San Rafael to have a safe layover
Right.
along the roadway. So Camilo's father was given the responsibility for the mission's livestock that grazed here and for being a restover spot on the El Camino Real. When his father died, Camilo was given that responsibility. And he was so trusted by the authorities that when the mission period ended and the Mexican period began, Camilo was backed by General Vallejo to get a Mexican land grant.
Wow.
So that he could stay on site
Interesting.
in his role along the El Camino Real. In this case, we see one of the three maps that General Vallejo himself submitted for, on Camilo's behalf to the Mexican governor in Monterrey.
Nice.
You see also in this case Camilo's branding iron and then other items that were from that Mexican era. In 1852, when California had become part of the United States, Camilo had transitioned into that era, but his land grant was challenged before the federal courts in San Francisco. The Land Commission was challenging all land grants that had been given during the Mexican era, and so he was no different than that. It was expensive, and Camilo had a friend that helped him out. James Black purchased the vast majority of Rancho Olompali and continued to pursue the land grant case in federal court. So 5 years later, in 1857, the land grant was confirmed by the United States government, and here is the copy of the patented land grant map.
For James Black.
For James Black,
to
who
be
had
the
bought
owner.
the majority of Rancho Olompali from Camilo. Camilo retained a portion of the property down in the vicinity of where the motel is now. He called it a Palacocha.
So James Black has an important role then for the next.
And when his daughter married, he gifted Rancho Olompali to his daughter Mary as her wedding gift. And here's an image of Mary here.
Aha.
In 1865, she and her husband Galen Burdell retired to Rancho Olompali.
So she married Mr. Burdell. Was he a dentist? Is he
Yes,
the one who
he
was a dentist?
yes.
Right. And that's
Right.
the Mount Burdell.
Right, that's correct.
Good.
And they came to Rancho Olompali and they turned it into a rural Victorian estate. So in this case, you see different artifacts from the Victorian era that represent her time here at Olompali.
Fabulous. And we'll be seeing the garden outside later on.
Correct.
Okay.
In this display case, we see a case that is dedicated to the early 1900s in the history of the park. James Black Burdell Sr. inherited Rancho Olompali in 1900 when his mother Mary passed away. And he was responsible for starting the dairy operations here at Olompali. And in the display case, we can see one of the packages for their dairy.
Right there, Burdell
Right.
Creamery. Fabulous.
Exactly. And also in 1911, he covered his mother's clapboard Victorian house with a stucco mansion.
That breaks my heart.
But in this case, you can see images of the stucco mansion in its heyday.
So I suppose it was pretty impressive for people at that time. But how sad to cover up that beautiful Victorian.
And the adobe, which Camilo Monisha built.
The original adobe was underneath it all. So it's like a three-level.
Right, and as
building.
we progress through the park, we're going to see.
Great. Okay, and there's more.
We are now at a display case that demonstrates the 1960s. In 1940, I'm going to back up a little though, and
Okay.
tell you that James Black Burdell Sr. passed away in the late 1930s. His wife, Josephine Sweetser Burdell, carried on here at Rancho Olompali until the 1940s. And in 1943, when her ranch hands went off to World War II, she was forced to sell the property.
Oh dear.
So she prepared the property and sold it to a gentleman by the name of Court Harrington, who held the property for 5 years and raised meat cattle here at Olompali. And then in the late 1940s, he sold the property to the Jesuits. So the University of San Francisco owned Rancho Olompali from the 1940s all the way up through the 1960s. And it was during the 1960s, when they were trying to sell the property to real estate syndicates, that a hippie commune came to reside at Rancho Olompali. So in 1967, Don McCoy and his friends they took a lease option out on the property and came to live at Rancho Olompali. They were here for 2 years, and during that period, the rock bands of the era came to visit and play, including the Grateful Dead and Jerry Garcia. But in 1969, an electrical fire broke out in the stucco mansion. It was a 1911 international style mansion. It had knob and tube wiring, and it had been a wet winter. They were plugging in electrical blankets and space heaters, and it broke out and burned the mansion down.
Oh, dear.
In this case, we see artifacts from the fire that were recovered.
Toothbrush, toothpaste, boots. Oh my.
All kinds of artifacts, yes. And so the commune period ended in 1969, and the property reverted back to the University of San Francisco. And it was in 1977 that Olompali went to the state of California as a state historic park.
Lovely story. Lovely story. Thank you. Well, let's go outside and look at some of the other buildings. So here we are outside, and I'm looking at this collection of buildings here with a fence around it for protection, whatever reason, but let me get this straight now. So there's an old adobe building in there.
Underneath the shed cover.
And then somebody came along and Mary Burdell came along and put the Victorian
clapboard house.
That made of wood, the clapboard you call it, made of wood. And then in the 1910 or whenever it was, 1911, I was close, then they put this stucco building over, and each one was his or her representation of the ultimate house at the time, right?
That is completely correct. Yes.
And then the fire came along and burned the most, the easily burnt material, which was the wood, which was the in-between structure. So typically what we can see most of here is the adobe remnants and then some of the stucco stuff. Is that it?
Correct.
Oh my,
Correct.
got it finally.
Correct. The adobe was built in 1843 by Camilo Monisha.
Okay.
It's the oldest standing adobe house north of San Francisco.
Wow.
It was right, as I said before, indoors. It was along the El Camino Real. So when James Black bought the property from Camilo, he moved the El Camino Real, or the public road, from right smack dab,
Here.
almost right where we're standing,
Wow.
to down to the vicinity of where Highway 101 is now.
And we can see the traffic right now,
That's
buzzing back
right.
and forth.
That's
That's
right.
it. Wow, that was a good
So
idea.
That's right. And so we have Camilo's adobe house, and then Mary incorporated the adobe house into the front of her Victorian clapboard house.
Got it.
So the front of her house was on this side, looking into her Victorian garden.
And this was all a beautiful garden at that
This
time.
was a very early,
lovely.
intact, large example of a California Victorian garden. She had it completely in place by 1874. The reason why it is in place so early is because she did not have to wait for city water to hook up into, to irrigate her landscape. So, by 1874, the clapboard house was here in incorporating the Camilo Monisha adobe, and she had her Victorian garden, which was anchored by the large andesite grotto fountain.
Ah, a fountain.
It had circumlinear pathways and north-south access, and there are some plant materials that are still there from her garden.
Amazing.
But when she passed away in 1900, her son James Blackburdell inherited the property. And as I had mentioned indoors, when we looked at the cases and you saw the beautiful representations of his stucco mansion, all we see now is the ruin.
Oh, that's so sad, so
Right.
sad. Oh, okay, Diane, I just love barns, and these are classic barns. Just tell us about these barns.
All right, the first barn, the smaller barn, is a late 19th century East Coast vernacular of an American barn.
Is that why that has that funny little thing on the top?
That's right, it has the cupola on top. Mary was the one who installed that barn, and then in 1900, probably her son, James Blackburdell Sr., had the larger rectangular barn built.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I
Yeah.
love it.
And they are tried and true, and they all the way up through the 19th century into the 20th century, and are in great shape now, although the barns are going to have some historical renovation done on them, as well as the other historic buildings that we are looking at here now.
So what are we looking at behind me?
We're
here?
looking at the blacksmith shop that Mary built, the supervisor's house behind it for ranch hands, and the salt box house over here behind the bay tree. That is also a ranch hand's house. And then behind us over here is the dairy barn that her son, James Blackburdell Sr., built in the 1930s.
For the Burdell Creamery.
Right.
Excellent.
And it's an early example of a sterile dairy barn.
Sterile being what?
Being that the floors are concrete, not dirt.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, where to next?
We're going up to the recreated Coast Miwok Village and the Ethnobotanical Garden.
Okay, let's go.
All right.
Diane, this has really got to be my favorite site of all, because I could just sort of feel it in my bones that, you know, the pride that the Coast Miwok people would have to be the host, to be the center of the hub of everything that goes on, to have the people coming from the south, the west, the north, and the east coming together to their place and to show off this spectacular place. Where people can meet old friends and life goes on. Tell us about it.
Well, here we are up at the recreated Coast Miwok Village and the Ethnobotanical Garden. We have it up here because we needed to come up out of the archaeological zone, which is down where the adobes were. So in this site we have recreated redwood coaches because they would have been buildings that would have been here.
Now you say coaches?
Coaches, not teepee, cocha.
Okay, coaches.
Right,
Okay.
a shelter. We also have had a tule cocha, which we are going to be rebuilding in this vicinity here. There is an outdoor education area that we have, and we also have a dance circle.
A dance, great.
The Ethnobotanical Garden was put in 2005, and it has all of the different plants that Coast Miwok would have used. So when you come to visit Olompali, make sure that you walk through the Ethnobotanical Garden. The interpretive signage will let you know the scientific name, the common name, the Coast Miwok name, and the Bodega Miwok name, if we know it, and the plant's use.
That's what's my favorite part. What did they use that for? Amazing things.
Right, right. Because plants provided technology, they provided medicine, they provided food, they provided cosmetics. So
That's amazing.
Yes, yes.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it all. Good.
So we have on our website, we have a PDF at olompali.org of the different plants that are in the garden.
So let's do that. www.olompali.org is your website. Excellent.
Yes.
Okay. Well, you know, I think Jim is waiting for me. And do you have any last minute comments?
Well, up here at the Ethnobotanical Garden, we have a monthly volunteer work day, the second Sunday of each month, where we work on maintenance of the Ethnobotanical Garden. And also we have done special projects. One project we did was a grassland study project on the flanks of Mount Burdell here in the background. We selected 7 different plots, and we had a control area and we had the study area.
Okay.
We're trying to figure out why this flank of hillside is not rich in wildflowers like it was 35 and 40 years ago.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. Tell us what, for anybody who wants to come out here, what are the days it's open and the hours?
Olompali is open Wednesdays through Sundays, 9 a.m. through 5 p.m.
Excellent. And I know you're pretty strict about that. And if anybody comes up outside of that time, they can't get in, right?
That's right. The gates have to be locked at 5 p.m.
Interesting.
Yes.
Diane, this has been just fabulous. I'm so glad we got you at this moment in time, and you were able to take us for a wonderful guided tour through the whole place here.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm so glad you could come out to Olomapli State Historic Park today.
Thank you. So we'll have to see Jim now. Come on, you guys. Hey, Jim, this has been a great visit today. I really, really enjoyed it.
You've been all over this park.
Yeah. So do you have any last minute thoughts for us?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about, you know, when I was here, when I was a little kid, I used to come up here as a little kid because my parents knew the caretakers of this place. This is in the 50s. And as a little kid, it was just wonderful. We could do anything you wanted. It wasn't a national park then because you really could do anything you wanted.
I don't want to say how old you are, but what year was that?
Like 55.
Okay.
You know? And so one thing, this was the way you got into Olompali. It was a carriage road. Originally it was a carriage road. Back then it was just this dirt road that went straight down to the highway. And it was always a challenge to get across the highway and up this road.
Okay.
And then once we come here.
And then it came on up there to
up here. The Jesuits were over there. There was a pool and lawn and everything. It was gorgeous.
Really?
And so, you know, sometimes I would get to bring my .22 and shoot at ground squirrels.
Uh-oh.
And a lot of what we did, you sort of realize that Miwoks lived here, and so we were always kind of looking around for artifacts and, you know, arrowheads. But really, all we could ever find was little chips. But anytime we found a chip of obsidian, it was a good deal. I mean, that was meant it was brought here by somebody else, and it was kind of a sign that Native Americans had been here.
And what about that big moment of history that took place right
So
here?
the big moment of
Yeah.
history is what I call California's Alamo. You know, and so at some point in the late 1840s, there was a point where the people from the United States wanted to push the people in Mexico out of California. This started over in Sonoma you've heard these names before, John C. Fremont, Kit Carson, and a bunch of other guys that thought California should be part of the United States. Let's get rid of these Mexicans. So they started a thing over in Sonoma. They pushed the Mexicans over here. The Mexicans were sort of staying here. And in the morning of, the late 1840s, they kind of met. A skirmish happened. And one Mexican died, a couple of Americans got wounded. And from then on, the Mexicans slowly retreated to Mexico. And that was the start of California being part of the United States.
Interesting.
So one of the things I remember when I was a kid is somewhere over in this area, there was this really old oak tree. And it had initials in it. And I always asked my friends what those initials meant. And they said, it was a hanging tree.
Ooh.
And so somebody would be hung there, and well, it turned out that wasn't a hanging tree, but what it was is the initials of the Mexican that had died.
Oh.
As kind of a memorial, somebody put that there.
Wow,
So
that's touching.
it was cool being able to come out here in the 50s, and it was great.
Well,
And it wasn't a totally empty place because there was a real live dairy going on up this road. So there was a lot of cows here, and there were, some ranchers here, and every once in a while a milk truck would come up this road. And
So I'm going to give you a test now, Jim.
okay,
This is one amazing tour here of 6 museums. Now let's see. Maybe people at home, they could be sitting there thinking, what are the 6 museums in Novato? But give us a rundown.
the 6 museums, really cool museums. They're all small. They're all in Novato. It's out of all the cities in Novato. Novato's the only one that has like 6 museums. So the 6 museums, starting in south and working north, there's Marin Mocha and Hamilton, Marin Museum of Contemporary Art. Then about 2 blocks away from there is the Hamilton History Museum. Then you come north a little bit and go across the highway to the Space Station Museum. And then you come up to Novato, you turn on DeLong, and you have Novato History Museum. And then you go out Novato Boulevard a little bit, and you have the Museum of American Indian. And last but not least, right where we are now,
Olompali.
This is a wonderful place.
This is just a fabulous
it's an
series
incredible spot.
of tours that you put together for us, Jim. And thank you very, very much.
And thank
Jim
you
Crumpler,
for doing this.
Thank you. And I want to thank also Diane Einstein for being here today, and Marcus Oken and Nick Logan, who are the filming crew from Novato Community Television, NCTV, along with their manager Pam Hesley. And of course I want to thank Freda Kaplan, who's the manager for the Sounding Board programs. But most of all, I want to thank you, our listening audience.